Hello guys and welcome. Before I go further in this video, I want to talk about some things. First and foremost, my name is Caleb and this is my YouTube channel where I teach basically programming, and you can subscribe to it if you want to get updated with some of the latest trends. Although I'm starting from the very beginning because of a lot of people out there who are really interested in programming but don't know how to start. And I have two sections for now. The first section is on HTML, CSS and JavaScript, and the second section is on Python programming. And I believe that as time goes on, this is going to grow bigger and bigger. So if you're interested, and I believe you are because you're already here, so click on the subscribe button to be able to get all the necessary information as they come. Okay, now from our last video we were talking about CSS. That's on the CSS part. I'll put a link to the playlist of Python tutorial in the description section. You can look at it up and begin to learn. So from our last video, as I was saying, we stopped at talking about some of the basic things in CSS because we're done with our HTML part, and you can also see the link to the playlist in the description as well. So we're going to pick up from there. We're going to be talking about margin and padding in this section. We'll also be looking at what is known as the box model, and we'll talk about CSS Reset and some of the default style of browsers. Okay, and as you can see, I'm just having an empty file here, and I'll begin by creating a boilerplate, which is just you hold your shift and 1 and you press enter. Emmet completes it for you. So I'm going to change the title to box model, and specifically we're going to be looking at margin and padding. Okay, and then I'm going to put in our style tag here, of course, because we're going to be styling inside of here instead of creating an external style sheet to do that. So then I'm going to create a div with a class of box, and then inside of this div I'll create a h3 element, and I'll call this box1, and I'll create a paragraph tag, and I'll kind of put in 30 text inside. I'll save this, copy this. Okay, I want this in two places so that you can be able to understand what we're doing. So I'll duplicate it below, and I'll call this 2. So if I run my live server now, you can see this is what we have here, and I'll make this big for now so you get to see some of the things I want to show us. And the next thing I'm going to open is, that is why we developers would always insist you have what is it called, the Chrome browser, because there's something called the Chrome developer tool, which you can click on this icon here. You come to more tools and developer tools, and this will open for you. You can choose wherever you want it to be by clicking on this and choosing where you want to dock it, either on the side or you want it to be on a separate window. I prefer keeping it below. So if you don't know how to do this, there's a shortcut. I'll close it and just press F12 on my keyboard, and you can see it comes out for you. There are a lot of things we have here, but basically for now we're going to be using the elements, these elements. So now I'll scroll below here, and there's something you can see here, which is a structure, and this structure here is made up of 4 parts. I'll try to explain each and every one of them. This is the first one, and if you see as I come here, it highlights here. So this is the first one, which is your content. So in this case, it's telling me that my content is taking this amount of space. So if I try to minimize this a bit, you see that it begins to reduce. So you can see that here. So I'll reduce it also because I want this to be like a bit smaller so that you can get a whole picture of what I'm saying. So we have this, and then the next part is the padding. Now what padding does is, padding prevents our element from resting on a border. Like what I'm going to do now is, inside our style, I'll create a class, And you remember how you create a class using that div name of box which we made here. So I'll create a class, and in this class I'll give a background. I want us to begin to understand this thing very well. I'll give a background of color pound f4 f4 f4, and I'll save this. So if I come back to this guy, you can now see that we have some gray color here for our stuff. So now this is the first one here. We can use our element selector here if you want to select a particular one. Okay, now I'm selecting this one. So in this one you see that we have a size of this, and then we have a padding, and then the padding prevents our element from resting on the border, which is the third part here. So let's try to make you understand this very well. Inside of this I'll create a border, and I'll give it 2 pixel solid red, and I'll save this. So you can see that our boxes have borders. So you can now see with me that this border, our content is resting directly on the border. So we don't want that to happen, and in order to shift this away from the border, we can, if you take a look at this, it is not the same with this top and bottom. That is because of something which our browser does for us by default, and in most cases you may not want that. And then that is where we talk about what is known as CSS resets, and there are a lot of them out there. So if I open the page here, which is Maya Web, and you see that the goal of a reset style sheet is to reduce browser inconsistencies in things like default line height and others. They are default browser styles that have already been given, that are placed in by the browser. So in order for you to avoid this and create this on your own, so that your browser will be consistent, your whatever you have designed will be consistent on different browsers, in most cases you have to use the CSS reset, and he has provided something which you can use here to make that happen. So you can there are a lot of things here, so I would not want to do all of this now, so I'll just create mine for you here. So I'll comment here, and you know how we make our comments on CSS. For some reasons, if I try to use the shortcut here, it doesn't work, so I'll be doing this manually. So now I'll call this CSS Reset, and inside of this I'll try to reset it. And to reset everything, you use star, and then you open whatever we have here, and I would want you to take a close look at this and see what happens when I begin to implement this. So I'll give all the margin of I'll give them 0, and I'll also give the padding of what, same 0, and I'll save this. So let's look at what happens when I save. So you can see that everything now comes directly to the edge of the box. That means we have removed the default padding and margin that was provided by this browser. So this is what we have now. So let's continue to explain what we're talking about here. So I'm just taking my time to explain all of this so you understand what we are actually doing. So now, talking about this one here, we can see now that we have the element of this size, and then there is a padding which we don't have again because we have removed it. So let us start adding padding, and there are various ways we can add padding. I'll copy this so I can easily paste and edit here. So there are various ways we can add padding. The first one is on both sides, on all sides, and it is very simple. Let's say we want to give a padding of, that is for our box. Okay, we are not inside. I'll have to do this inside the box because that's what we're working on. So now I'll give a padding of, let's say, 20 pixels. So if we take a look at this again, you would see that we now have space between all of them of 20 pixels. So if you can see now, this is the element, this is the padding, and this is the element, this is the padding. If I click on this selector, and you can see we have that color here, as our padding. And then we have the next is our border. This is our border here. This is the padding. The next is our border, and we already have a border. Now what the margin does is that it tries to separate these two elements from coming together. So let's come back to this, and I'll create a margin somewhere here, and let's give the margin of 10 pixels. Now if I give a margin of 10 pixels and save, so you can see what happens is that we now have a space of 10 pixels between all sides, both the left, the right, and let me unselect this. So you have a margin here, 10 pixel, 10 pixel, 10 pixel, and I believe you can understand what we're trying to do. Okay, this is the first one of how we can give padding. In some instances, you may not want to give the same amount of padding on all sides. So the next thing is a kind of to try to give padding per side. So I'll paste this here again, padding per side, and then this is how we can do that. Padding, we start with padding top. I'm doing this convention for a particular reason. I'll explain in the next one. Let's give the padding top of, let's say, 10 pixels, and then the next is padding right. I'll give the padding right of 20 pixels. Next is padding bottom. Let's give this 10 pixel, and then next is padding left. We'll give this 20 pixel, and we save. Now if we save, you would see that for the top and bottom we're having 10 pixel. Let's change it so we can, I'll give this 50 here so we can see this clearly. So you would see now that for the top and bottom we're having 10 pixel, but on the left and the right we're having 20 pixel. Let me make this okay, so we can see this very well now. It is applying on both sides of the box. We're having 10 pixel on this side, and then on this side we're having 50 pixel. Now instead of writing all of this like this, there was a reason I had to a kind of put top. If you look at this convention here, what I did was top, right, bottom, and left. So instead of typing all of this, there is a way we can do it by, I'll paste this again, padding, shorthand, and this is how you do it. You just put padding, and what you do now is 10 pixel, 50 pixel, 10 pixel again, and 50 pixel. So if I save this now, the our style will still be the same. Now there is something about whenever we're writing padding, the one below overwrites the one above. So if I am to write something else here, it will overwrite. Let me change this on the left to, let's say, 100, and I save. So if we come back to our element, you see now that we have a larger one here, so it overwrites this one here. So what happens is that it starts from the top to the right to the bottom and then the left. So that is another way we can put padding. Let me include this so that you will easily understand it. So I'll copy something and I'll paste here. So this is like the shorthand for it: top, right, bottom, and left. So that is how this works. And then there's also another way we can do this. Instead of writing, we know that the top and bottom are the same, the left and right are the same. So instead of writing that's like that, we can still make it smaller. So I'll put this here, and then I'll copy this out of here, paste here. So I'll just delete these two. So what has happened, we'll still get the same thing we had before here, but what has happened is that this first one represents top and bottom, and while this other one represents the left and the right. So I believe you understand what this means. So it is the same thing with margin. This same thing we've done for bottom, top, for padding, separating it, is the same thing for margin. So for margin is the same thing. We just have to still just change all this padding to margin. So the same way we changed, we can apply the padding to only the top or to the right, to the left, and all of this. It is also applicable for margin. So I'll just copy this out and I'll paste below here, and let me try to change, I think okay, from here let me try to change all those paddings to margin. So I'll change to margin, and you see the last one is what will get applied here, because this is it. And then let's look at this now. We can see that because we had to reset all of this with our, because we had to reset everything with our CSS reset, you would see that our heading element is almost directly to the body. So we can change that by creating, we have h3, so we can say h3, and we can begin to style. Let's give it a padding bottom, but padding bottom of 10, let's say 20 pixel, and we save that. So you see now that our h3 has a space between. So that is what is used to make all of these things look like this. Now I want to talk of one more important thing, because we're using CSS Reset. Let's say we give our box a width of about, let's say 300 pixel. That means our box has, I'll make this big now so you can see that did not work. So let's come back. I'll see. So I have to close this. So we've given this a width of 300 pixel, and then we have this. So because we're using CSS Reset, what happens is that the default browser will also include its width to this 300 pixel. So in order to change this, and whenever we're using CSS Reset, we need to add another attribute to this, which is known as the box sizing, and we give an attribute of border box. So if I bring this, if I save this now and we come back here, so you can now see it has just taken 300 pixel, unlike before, while it added the default to it as well. So I believe that is that on this topic.